Okay, I'm re-recording this. I did a take. It was like 12 minutes, and I rambled too much. So, and this is kind of boring stuff. So I'll just try to go through it a little more quicker. Just just with the goal of keeping people up to date. And if you're really into getting into the details, I'm happy to talk, and you can read what I've going on here. But it's pretty dense stuff. It's hard to make it showy and exciting. But yeah, so what I'm doing is I've re-implemented how the beacons work. So I got this beacons spec. So I had the old beacon thing here. So I've rethought. It's mostly the same, but I've kind of rethought it, and I've added some amenities to kind of make it a little more upgradable. Kind of. Um, I've borrowed some ideas from the Bolt spec to allow people to add additional data into stuff like the beacons and the messages, such that in the future, when we think of cool ideas, there's a pathway to get that into Moneysocket, at least experimentally. So yeah, I've just kind of redone this, rethought it in a more professional way that's like inspired by the Lightning RFC. So I'm borrowing a lot of the encoding, which is like the TLV stuff. So I have an implementation of Bolt 1 and Bolt 4. I actually did that prior to working on Moneysocket. I had a project called Onion Studio where I implemented that stuff to send stuff in band in Lightning. So that's kind of the basis, and what you get with that is kind of you get the same thinking that the Lightning spec used for extensibility. So I'm trying to make sure that Moneysocket is as good as that for future experiments, and that's just a matter of doing it intelligently now. So yeah, I implemented beacons. So yeah, there's the encoding stuff. I have tests for that. So these are my unit tests of the Python implementation. It's passing the test vectors in Bolt 1, and I think some from Bolt 4 that just test all the TLV and the big size and the integer encoding. So that's all there. But in implementing the beacons, this has some new fields, but in the implementation, you can kind of see what all the edge cases are, all the errors, all the things we want to tolerate and not tolerate. I encoded those into test vectors. So in the same way that the Lightning RFC published test vectors, I'm publishing test vectors here for the beacon, such that when the JavaScript and the Rust and the whatever else Go implementation implements these beacons, here's all the test cases that are ready to go. So there's a few fields that weren't in the old one that are now in the new one, such as the generator, the wallet hint. So there's sort of a hint field to say like, hey, I'm a consumer and I'm looking for a provider. So that will help each end to kind of be more forward about what role they are and what they're looking for, such that you can kind of error and also like display it on screen in a way that makes sense. We were talking about like the outlet versus the plugs. It's sort of like a visual metaphor. So like that, this would inform that, how to draw it on the UI. That kind of thing. You can have multiple locations. So like here's a local host WebSocket, so that you can you connect local hosts because that's low latency, or you could connect via the relay. So the beacon gives both of those two things as options, and then whoever's connecting can choose. And then the idea of like an unknown location. So if a future version of Moneysocket has some new interconnect, some fancy Bluetooth or whatever, but the old version is connecting, they can just ignore the fact that that's even an option and just go with the options that they understand. So there's a way to ignore stuff that when there's a version mismatch, this just shows up as like an unknown TLV. In the same way, also you can include additional TLVs. So there's maybe a few reasons why you might want to do that. Like I have, like the software version is included here, but maybe you need more detail. Maybe just for debug reasons, you want to throw in like what the SHA-1 commit of, this is Python versus JavaScript or whatever. You could put more details just kind of jammed into the beacon for anybody that's interested. And that's totally optional because it doesn't actually have it shouldn't have any impact on how the thing's programmed, but it is convenient if you're debugging something. So yeah, anyways, that's the beacon stuff. It all passes as unit tests. Those are published in the spec, which I've written and I've kind of tweaked so the code matches the spec, matches the test vectors. So now, yeah, just the task here is to just continue on with that and the provider info and the in-band messaging. That's kind of the next thing. I'm working on unit tests for that. And then, yeah, working up the stack, taking the old implementation and making sure it's all rethought and specified, and then getting the spec matching the tests, matching the actual reference implementation. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. It's a grind. It'll be many weeks to get through this all. But yeah, that's my update for now. So, thanks.